Thank you very much for introduction. I'm so honored to have this opportunity to give a talk in this conference. It's so pity that I'm not in Paderborn, but now in Tokyo, very hot and really chaotic before the planned opening of the Olympic Games. And I'm waiting for the first COVID-19 vaccine shot tomorrow. I miss Paderborn. I visited last IAPh in 2019 before the pandemic. It was so beautiful and I enjoyed a lot. I hope to see you again in the near future in the beautiful town, not so far. So actually, my talk focus on the woman philosopher from Japan, Fumi Takahashi, and she actually stayed in Berlin and Freiburg in 1936 to 1939, and she actually attended the openings of Berlin Olympic in 1936 and wrote some articles. And it was one of the connection of today and this talk. And so I mentioned the Olympic stuff. And it's really kind of nationalistic event. And this time, I really remember what happened in Berlin at that time and afterward. I'm really afraid what's going on. And Takahashi actually studied in Germany, but most women who studied abroad before World War II went to the English-speaking world, United States and United Kingdom, but she chose Germany. So I tried to find out why she chose Germany to study philosophy and what's going on in her life. And the key person is Yasui Tetsu. She studied in actually British schools. And she imported the notion of philosophy and ethics for women to Japan before Takahashi. And she actually recommended Takahashi to keep studying philosophy after she Takahashi graduated from Tokyo Women's University. Yasui actually was the chairperson, dean of the school. So she was the hidden figure, and she was not remembered as philosopher. She is just mentioned as educator nowadays. So another educator, women educator of Japan, very famous, Suda Ume. So she studied in the United States since she was 5 years old, very young. And she graduated from high school and she continued studying in Bryn Mawr College and returned to Japan and established Suda College Women's School. But both Suda and Yasui are remembered now as educator, not scientist or philosopher. My question is why? Actually, Tsuda published a paper on biology when she was working with her professor in Bryn Mawr, but it's totally erased, even in Bryn Mawr history. It sounds so weird. The Bryn Mawr College just mentioned her as become an English teacher to enlighten other Japanese women. No mention anything about the academic area. She studied biology. And Yasui also studied philosophy, but her expertise is not mentioned at all. Her school, she established Tokyo Women's University, but that university mentions her as just educator. So why are they remembered just in education, not in their specialties? So the tentative answer, very short, is calling educators. It's the method of marginalization of specialization. So no other career path words allowed to women, and sometimes still now it's not allowed. So in particular, philosophy is excluded from women's schools. Since 1910, some women allowed to study in imperial universities and pursued their career in natural science, mathematics, biology, chemistry. But philosophy is kind of exception. Takahashi was the first women student who entered Imperial University as regular student. And women who wanted to study philosophy at that time went to the teachers' college under like Yasui, but they get only middle school teacher positions. So the women education is actually kind of history of segregation. Women's field are considered to the knowledge and skills for good wives and wise mothers. So arts, language, and ethics for family. And it's pretty much nationalistic ethics, so that how women obey to men or something like that. And Yasui actually imported it from the Victorian England, and that became the standard of the curriculum for women in Japan before World War II. And it still survives. So still now, there is kind of tension between education for family supporter and education for independent individuals. And in schools for girls now, some schools actually prefer philosophy and ethics for good wives and wise mothers, while only few schools, school for girls and co-education school, philosophy and science are emphasized for both girls and boys. Still now, philosophers and scientists in Japan, women, are often called terrifying still now. So it's pretty bad, and we try to change it. And this period, especially the late 1930s to the end of the World War II, philosophy is emphasized as a method of nationalistic Japan. So it's for protection of the country and pretty much male-dominated. And those two imperial universities, first Tokyo and second Kyoto, are both cooperated with the military force. Tokyo Imperial University, especially the Department of Ethics, have the connection with the Imperial Army, and it still survives. And Kyoto Imperial University, Nishida is very famous one, Kyoto School. It has a big, strong connection with Imperial Navy, and they purged after World War II. Nishida Kitaro is the key person for the Kyoto Imperial University at the time. And so this is another kind of nationalistic university, teacher college, and now called Ochanomizu University. It's still women's university. And in that thread, ethics was mandatory for philosophy students because ethics is mandatory for middle school teacher's license. And they actually focus on ethics for women. And now this historical fact is almost forgotten, so they try to change it. Still, they have a strong atmosphere to do that. And because they are not considered to be important, so there was no political purge after World War II. So faculty member there was just kept there. And this is the third Imperial University, Tohoku University, but this university was pretty going different way. They have some consensus of accepting women academics against the intention of the Ministry of the Education. And they accepted the first women students in chemistry and mathematics in 1904. And they actually accepted those philosophers. They are pretty much supporting women students in philosophy. Ishihara Ken actually focused on Christian philosophy and studied in Heidelberg and Basel. And he moved from Tokyo Imperial University and later taught in Tokyo Women's University. And Doi Tomomitsu, he's doing actually English literature, but she also supported women to study. And both working in Tohoku University when Takahashi was accepted to Tohoku University Department of Philosophy. So Takahashi was actually the niece of Nishida Kitaro, the head of Kyoto School philosopher. Takahashi got the a bachelor's degree in philosophy in Tohoku Imperial University in 1929 and taught philosophy and logic in women's colleges in Tokyo, then studied philosophy in Berlin and Freiburg. But she suffered from the tuberculosis and untimely passed away in 1945. So she was born in the middle Ishikawa area, Kanazawa area. It's beautiful old town, but her family is doing silk fabric manufacturer to export. So her father passed away very early. So mother actually took over the management of the factory, and that is one of the reasons why she tried to be a leader. And she actually rejected the standard career path for intellectual women, a teacher. So she didn't vote to go to the Tokyo Women's Teachers College. She rejected. She didn't want to be a teacher. She didn't want to be a mother or a good educator. She rejected. So there was some gap year after her graduation from the middle school. Instead, she went to Tokyo Women's University. So Tokyo University actually had Yasui Tetsu as the philosophy teacher and Nitobe Inazo and other Christian philosophers. It's a Christian school, and it's not national universities. And women's university are actually not officially considered to be university at that time. So those women who were eager to study unofficially attended classes in imperial universities. And Takahashi actually attended the Ishihara Ken's class in Tokyo Imperial University. And that is one of the reasons why she chose Tohoku Imperial University to continue her study in philosophy. And after the Tokyo graduation from Tokyo Women's University, actually there is another gap year. And her family and her uncle Nishida Kitaro actually tried to make her married, but she rejected matchmaking. with the actually it was matchmaking with Akutagawa Ryunosuke, who was the very famous novelist, but she rejected, and Akutagawa actually committed suicide next year. And the point is the Tokyo Women's University and other Christian schools, missionary schools, are considered to be the enemy, national enemy from the nationalistic policy. So they try to teach something else than who wants to be the kind of strong Japan, imperial Japan, or that kind of the unified fascistic Japan. So Takahashi had strong feeling of rebel against super nationalistic Japan. Although she tried to give a talk on need of higher education for women. She actually made some good talks in symposia about the how women to be educated in Japan. So, but she only got the position of Japanese language teacher in Jiyu Gakuen. It's a very liberal school, and they taught liberal arts, and they tried to teach philosophy, though the official position was anyway Japanese language. But she let students to read philosophy text. So in that sense, she tried to be philosopher, and she developed the idea how women to work in philosophy. So she went to Berlin with support of the Iwanami publication. So it's pretty much important because it's not from the governmental funding nor funding from missionaries or Christians. So it's pretty rare case. At that time, most of people who studied abroad from Japan got some scholarship from the Japanese government or those Christian parties, especially from the United States. Though she chose Germany and so studied philosophy, so that was her hope. And she actually arrived Berlin in May 1936, and she was asked to write some articles on Olympic. So most of the Japanese who lived in Berlin at that time attended the Olympic at the time. And so they are actually pretty much influenced by the Nazis' idea, and they almost accepted it. But she got teaching position at the newly established School for Japanese Pupils in Berlin in 1936. So she accompanied those students to the Olympic. And most of the students are girls, because boys are considered to be educated in Japan. So those parents send their sons back to Japan. But for girls, parents keep them studying abroad, especially in Germany and United States, United Kingdom, or other places where the father worked. But Takahashi actually encouraged those students, girls, but she losing time for researching philosophy, but this is a student memory. Difference of men and women is formed in education. The fact that the national curriculum for women is different from that for men reveals that the Ministry of Education intended education good wives and wise mothers, depriving women from academic work. If you Japanese girls follow such a curriculum, you can't work as German women. German women went out to the society when men went to the World War I. Then they did keep working, struggling both for work and family. That was what Takahashi told her students in Berlin. Some students actually interviewed to talk her memory, and this is the key point. So to show Takahashi was pretty much anti-fascist. But that is one of the reasons why she couldn't fit in Japan at that time, of course. Then she really wanted to study philosophy, so she resigned from this Berlin school for Japanese students and moved to Freiburg in March 1938. So she attended class of Heidegger, and she actually took some awareness of different value system in East and West, and Heidegger at the time mentioned that kind of point, perhaps under some influence with the communication with Japanese students. There are many Japanese students who wanted to talk with Heidegger at the time, men and women. And at that time, she gave 2 talks in Freiburg and near suburban Freiburg. One is the history of Catholic Church in Japan in Gunther style. She actually worked on Christian philosophy under Ishihara in Tohoku University because Ishihara was working on Christian philosophy. So that was one of the reasons why she picked up the topic. But another is the Western concept of family and Japanese ie. It's much like nowadays translated in like family and house, but it's really connected to the nationalistic idea of ie. So at that moment, the Japanese emperor is the parent and the father of the whole Japan country. That was the idea, basic idea of fascist Japan. So it's more like the Nazis, and we could have kind of similarity. Of course, there are many differences between Nazis Germany and this nationalistic Japan in early 1940s. But she tried to find out the difference at that moment to give this kind of talk. Of course, she mentioned about the roles of mother and roles of wives and that kind of thing, but her idea should be the much more like political philosophy. She also gave a translation of Nishida Kitaro, her uncle, cultural forms of ancient East and West from the metaphysical standpoint. I couldn't get the German translation of this work, but I tried to find out maybe by the next time. But this is the point. Please tell me, what is this certification means in German context? They say Takahashi obtained a German national certification of pedagogisch diploma in August 1939. So that is the one of the certificates to show what Takahashi was doing in Freiburg. But there was I'm not able to access the historic context of this kind of diploma. And so, but because of the beginning of the World War II and the Takahashi got the tuberculosis in Freiburg, so she left Germany and in November with the last ship to Japan from Europe. So this is what Takahashi talked in Heidegger seminar, or this is her memory after she went back to Japan. Individual human life is full of hardships and misfortunes, but Europeans believe that life should be enjoyable. If life is not joyful, we try to make it enjoyable. They believe that it's natural for people to enjoy. Japanese people, on the other hand, think that life should be hard. Thinking and trying to make it life joyful is a sin to lead to misfortune. They believe that life is like to walk with a heavy burden, so once you take a break, you will be accused. I don't claim which is right, but just point out that the former is European and the latter is Eastern. Having been born and raised in the East, I have now lived in the West for a few years and have been exposed to this contrasting atmosphere. I must confess I feel relaxed in the foreign land. So it's really like this. So watch the Olympic this time. What's going on? It's really hard, chaotic. So it's not so changing. And this also reflects the idea of how we use technology, perhaps. So the Europeans, we believe, Europeans try to use technology to make it life easier. But for Japanese, it's not like that. We make it the more complicated society, perhaps. So the idea of technology also reflects her observation. And another philosopher, INANUMA Fumi. So she actually followed the same career path as Takahashi Fumi. So she studied philosophy in Tokyo Women's University, graduated in Tohoku Imperial University, and then went to Berlin and taught in school for Japanese pupils immediately after Takahashi resigned and moved to Freiburg. And she also went back to Japan with the same evacuation ship with Takahashi and other students in 1939. But her career after that is unknown. But she published 6 translations of Christian books in late 1960s and 1970s. So she actually doing some Christian philosophy even after World War II, but she didn't get any position. So, but both remembered only as educators or teachers in Berlin School for Japanese students. Academic positions is not opened at that moment. And still now, we are minority. So the key question, why education is considered to be female? So it's almost used as a ghetto, so depriving women from scientific professionalism, and they put into education. So this is how women researchers have been excluded in Japan, and the method was education, or taking them as educator. So there were kind of double standard still now, international student and nationalistic standard, and this is the attention we should observe at the Olympic game was this time too, so please watch. So return to the initial question. So the triple exclusion of women in philosophy, especially in Japan, yeah, misogyny and institutional injustice. Women are excluded from those philosophy, political thought, and science still now. And also, the supporter of women in education is mainly Christians, which are considered to be national enemy from nationalistic people. So it's one of the reasons. And another is exclusion of American philosophy in core philosophy in national universities. Inoue Tetsujiro, actually the first Japanese professor in Tokyo Imperial University philosophy, actually studied American philosophy first, then studied German philosophy next, then compare, and he preferred German philosophy. So he sent all of his students to Germany. And Takahashi, perhaps she didn't realize what's going on, but she chose Germany to study. So she was actually trying to follow the standard career path of philosophers in Japan who are educated in Tokyo Imperial University, but she couldn't make it because of her tuberculosis. It's really pity what she could have done if she was healthy. So this is the end of my story. Thank you for listening.